not wasting time for ourselves or for the staff or incurring extra costs with the attorney. But yeah, I think we're moving things along. Meetings aren't quite so long anymore.
I know it's been a really interesting and unique experience for me being on this board. So I thought for the most part people got along well, courteous to each other most of the time. So, you know, it's my last meeting, I guess, this will also the other people, but yeah, it's been a good experience. Appreciated it.
Dr. Davis?
I'm not as optimistic as that because I've had completely false accusations against me personally, and also we've had false accusations and names brought by one of the staff's spouses. Came up here and totally lied, and that's not good. So anyway, no, I'm not real happy with some of the board members. You know, basically false accusations and without a lick of proof and so on, and that shouldn't be that way. So that's my opinion. That's all.
That makes me. Well, I'm going to say that working with staff this last year has been a pleasure. I think we've made forward movement and progress here toward the future, not just right now, but building something for the future for San Miguel. And I think we should be proud of that. I want to thank Director Davis for his negative comments. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, public comment?
Public comment. Okay, San Miguel Fire Department, divestiture of the San Miguel Community Services from the San Miguel Community Services District.
Good evening. Nice to meet you again. And this item is lengthy. The staff report and the accompanying items are 84 pages long. So to summarize it, what this request is to review and approve the resolution that's attached to this staff report. And that's 2024-56. And that is giving the fire chief the authority to engage LAFCO in the divestiture process for the San Miguel Fire Department, into a San Miguel Fire District. In length, the discussion gives you the history of the department from 1888 to 2000 to the present day. This process has been reviewed, discussed, and approved by the board and outlined within our strategic plan. And that was completed 2 years ago, and the update last year would be coming up in January again. The update was discussed, received, and acknowledged that the need is there. The process has been discussed with LAFCO. We've had a few meetings with LAFCO, and the resolution, or not the resolution, but the process has been noted in LAFCO's municipal service review. That was just completed last year. That was one of the key items that we needed to have completed before we started down this path. And the need is mentioned within the LAFCO municipal service review as well. So all agencies appear to be on board, and this resolution basically just gives the fire chief the authority to engage LAFCO and move forward with the process. It's a lengthy process. It could take up to 2 years. But just like when we apply for grants, we apply for a SAFER grant, or for an AFG grant, or any grant of significant dollar amounts, the board gives approval for the fire chief to be the point of contact to engage the grantee in that process. So that's what we are looking for at this point in time, is just to start the process with LAFCO. And there's a couple different routes that can be taken. So there is no dollar amount attached to this resolution. The resolution is just to acknowledge the need and grant the permission. The LAFCO process does have dollar amounts, and when asked for a roadmap per se from LAFCO, I've always given, well, we could go this way or we could go this way. There wasn't a solid outline of what to do. It just depends on which path is taken. And the current temperature seems to be that it would be put to a vote. And that would be the most cost-effective, streamlined, and fairest way to move forward with this process. By capturing a bigger footprint, the department will be able to collect additional revenue, and there will be no burden on any of the properties that are incorporated into the new fire district. The Prop 13 protects property rights and property tax rates, and the county collects those property taxes, and then they're distributed to the district, to the current San Miguel Fire District of 5.5 square miles. So with the expansion of the district, and there's a map at the tail end of this presentation, and you can see the existing boundary and what the current boundary is, there'd be no undue cost to the taxpayers in that area. It would just be a shift in tax revenue from the county to the San Miguel Fire District, and that would allow us to provide staffing. Our number one priority is staffing. We need to up our staffing to be able to serve our community better and be able to serve the surrounding communities better. We do service those outlying communities that are detailed within that APM proposal with the new district boundary outline, and the county would collect those funds, and then they would just distribute us a 12% or 12.75% or 13% portion of that 1% that is collected, and that would come out of the county's general fund. The only opposition that I've faced has been with the county, because they don't want any money coming from their general fund. And the response was, well, this would negatively impact the county in other areas. But I don't believe the property owners within this footprint are really concerned about what happens in southern San Luis Obispo County or other areas. They're concerned about what happens in their backyard, being able to provide fire service within a timely manner to meet their needs when the time of need comes. So that, in a nutshell, is what this resolution is about. It's just to give the recognition of the need and acknowledgement to the fire chief to continue through the process. I've presented the map to the county tax collector, and I showed them the APN boundaries, and they verified the properties within those APN boundaries. There was 3 properties that were large parcels that were to the east, that the property boundary kind of split that property into 2, so there's some adjustments that have to be made, whether that property be inside or outside of the newly formed district. The newly formed district would have representation of a board from residents from all areas. So I think everybody needs to be represented on the east side, the north, south, west side. So it would be a broader scope of input. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Director Gregory, you have something?
Yes. How did you arrive at that map, the future?
So there was
And just to be clear, is that on page 188?
there's a bunch of, yes.
Okay.
Let me get to
At the
one.
very end.
So what we did was we looked at a report that was generated by CAL FIRE. It was called the Special District Survey, and it was generated in 2016 as a request of the unit chief at the time, Scott Jalber. And they did a special district survey and looked at the serviceability of fire departments that are community service district related or ownership. So we took that into consideration at our time of responses, and then we looked at what the county was providing. So if, let's say, we weren't able to respond, if we didn't have any staff, which doesn't happen anymore, but the fire response would be coming from CAL FIRE Station 30. Station 30 is 15 miles away, so you're looking at an extremely delayed response, and that is the same for the residents within that sphere of influence that we've captured in that APN map. So looking at the information provided by CAL FIRE and their time of response, and looking at our information from our time of responses, and looking at our data for our time of responses into those outlying areas, we determined that it made sense for us to move north to the Monterey County line because that's an unrepresented, unincorporated area. And there's a lot of large parcels up there. A lot of them are the Williamson Act, so they have a low tax threshold, but they're low frequency. And then it made sense to follow the Camp Roberts border because we're not going to cross into Camp Roberts. Camp Roberts does service on Ottawa, but they get locked down and sometimes they cannot respond. So we took it to the Camp Roberts border, and our time of response from the station to that boundary is about 7 minutes. So that was reasonable to take it to that western edge. We went to the south and we looked at the Welsona intersection. The Welsona intersection is problematic. So that is an area that's a really gray area that can be better served by San Miguel Fire because we have about 6 miles to that area, and your first dispatch is coming from Paso Robles, and then second is coming from Station 30, which is on Ramada, and then Station 52, which is out of Meridian. So we determined that that southern border, based on time of response, should be Welsona. We took that Welsona border because it was an easy property line border to follow because it's a main road out to the east. And then we looked at our time of response to the east, and what our data shows, we could make it out to Airport Road typically faster than agencies or CAL FIRE's Station 52 on Meridian responding to that area. Sometimes we respond and we get to that area simultaneously. It's happened in the past, but a lot of times we're there ahead of time. So that seemed to be the benchmark for the eastern boundary. And then we simply follow that north into Pleasant Valley Road and back to the Monterey County line. So we're not encroaching into Monterey County, we're not encroaching into Camp Roberts, and we're not encroaching into Paso Robles. We're just looking at the unincorporated area of San Luis Obispo County that people are paying tax dollars to the county, but they aren't represented by really a fire department. So by absorbing that footprint and taking on that responsibility, we would get the revenue generated for that. And it would double our budget, which isn't a whole lot, but the level of service would escalate dramatically. And those people and the community of San Miguel deserve better representation in their emergency response personnel. That was a long answer, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate that, and I followed all along. We have the map here, and that makes total sense. My other follow-up question on that is, you mentioned that it's doubling your budget. Give me a few examples of what you would be able to do with an increased budget.
What we would do is we would hire staff. We would up our staffing levels. So we're always looking, if we're applying for the SAFER grant, to take our staffing to 2.0 staffing, which means 2 people on board 24/7, 365. With the SAFER grant, you have to have a mechanism to continue. They want to see that you can continue that fund or continue that financial obligation. And with this expanded footprint, it would provide the funding for that on an annual basis. So that would be the first thing that we would do, is focus on staffing and get that staffing requirement nailed down so we can meet NFPA 710 requirements. We fall short sometimes, unfortunately, because we are a paid call fire department. So sometimes we don't meet that 3-4 people on scene within 5 to 7 minutes. The second would be that we would hold money back and use that for our engine replacement program. We need to establish an engine replacement program. Our Type 1 fire apparatus is 2010. It's going to time out, so we need to start focusing on that. And to get a new fire apparatus, you're looking at a 3-year production line. So if we walked into Pierce and gave them money, we're still 3 years out. So we're going to start looking at that in the next couple of years. And then thirdly, we would use funds to expand our facility, because we need to expand our facility to house and provide office space for the growing department. Future need would be, looking at a second station, but that's way down the road, probably well beyond, my tenure. But that would be a long-term goal, would be to look at staffing another station closer to the Welsona. So people on Monterey Road have representation. We go to Monterey Road quite often, and we're always, I'm not going to say always, because that's incorrect. majority of the time, if not 99% of the time, first on scene. So we try to provide a higher level service for everybody living within that footprint.
Okay, all right, very good. And just to be clear, as of right now, you are already servicing those areas, but we're not getting
Correct.
paid for those, is that
Correct.
correct?
So we have an auto aid agreement, and our auto aid agreement extends to those property boundaries into Camp Roberts. We do not go into the Monterey County area very often anymore, and that's something that I don't want to cross that bridge right now, because we need to take care of our own before we start going into Monterey. We need to take care of San Luis Obispo. The only mechanism for cost recovery in those areas are cost recovery with Cost Recovery USA. So if we have vehicle accidents and things of that nature, we can recover some of our costs. And that's been successful to a minor degree, but for fires and things like, medical aids, obviously we don't get compensated for that, but we want to be there for those residents. We are there for the residents, but this would just increase their level of service, and there would be really no cost to them.
Are you servicing Kings Ranch right now?
Excuse me?
Kings Ranch? The development that's on Cross Canyons Road all the way up into the Monterey County line?
That would be in Monterey County. So if there was a call, we would go, but we don't go on an auto aid into Monterey County.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't service that. Our cutoff for this particular footprint is, I believe it goes airport to Pleasant Valley Road and up to the Monterey County line.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Director Calvins.
A couple of things. First off, Chief, thank you for the report and the presentation. One thing that you didn't mention, you can't cross the county line without state authorization for a special district. You'd have to get special enabling legislation to do that. Sorry, I read the law too much.
We have no desire to cross the
So, the other thing also is, I know there's been a debate for years back and forth about focusing on the district boundaries, everything else. This is going to be a huge benefit to people who live on West 10th Street, all those other neighborhoods, because as of right now, anyone who drives out of this town, they know how much traffic is bad in the city of Paso Robles. Relying on a Cal Fire station that has to drive through the city of Paso Robles one way or another will run into traffic, and the chances of a person having serious medical incident and then surviving, relying on a station and responding from Templeton is very poor. So I think it's very important that we do this and that we provide this service to this area. So I always thought it was ridiculous, seeing a Cal Fire engine literally driving to the district boundaries, drive past the fire station, and then go up to one of the ranch areas. It's just silly. That doesn't help anybody. So.
No, sometimes that doesn't make sense. There would be a large benefit to the people on Monterey Road. I think, you have to look at our statistics and where we go, but it would be a mutual benefit to pretty much everybody. And they would share in our ISO rating, which would reduce everybody's insurance liability, because that's a big deal when you're looking to insure your property and you're outside of the district boundaries, then you're relying on the response times for CAL FIRE from Station 30, and it's going to be 15 to 17 minutes. So if we had full-time staffing and we had a bigger footprint, then the people within those areas would be able to benefit in that way as well.
And then I also we have a few people from the fire department who also showed up, and so I'm thankful that you guys showed on up, and also curious what your thoughts are too. Because the fire department, I appreciate everyone's service to our community.
Thank you. We appreciate your support.
Is that it, Director Calvins?
At this moment, yes.
Okay. Director Baker.
Yeah, question. So these areas that were not currently in our district, so their tax money or their 1%, portion of the 1%, who's getting that money?
So that goes into the county general fund, and then the county general fund disperses funds however they choose. I asked for what is the specific amount of tax dollar per property that goes into the fire department. They couldn't give me an answer. So just as a snapshot, last year's budget for CAL FIRE was $26 million for San Luis Obispo County. And we're operating at $500,000, and if we had another $400,000, we could do a lot. Engineer Navarro and myself did this survey about a year and a half ago, if not more, and we looked at all the APNs, and we made a list of APNs, and we looked at the assessed value of all those, and we did a broadsword swing of it, and we were looking, I think about 475 would have been our portion that would come to us if we used our base rate of 12.75% of the 1%.
Okay, so then, but basically that 475 would be coming out of CAL FIRE.
Yes, out of their $26 million budget.
Right, which, well, yeah, they service a pretty big area.
They do
Okay.
service a large area,
Yeah,
and that's problematic in my opinion. They get ran ragged. Station 30 is the busiest station in the county, and they're running calls everywhere. So CAL FIRE has a model where they want to have X amount of engines on every call, so you might not even get a response because they could be tied up somewhere else. So that's another dynamic that I didn't discuss, but it's a situation with CAL FIRE where they're, taxing their staff to keep their response personnel numbers, on par or above par in their opinion.
does CAL FIRE, are they offered an opinion on this plan? Are they?
They have not. The only concern was our staffing model, and at the time of the conversation, I didn't really have a good staffing model, and it wasn't presented, so that was their one contention was, well, what's your staffing model? And we were trying to look at what Templeton was doing at the time, but that doesn't really make sense for us. What makes sense for us is 2 on board, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a chief officer. So that would be our staffing model. We would still utilize the PCF reserve, or not reserve, the paid call firefighter model as well, to fill those extra seats or to bring extra equipment. And that's something that CAL FIRE does not do. They moved away from that model. Templeton still does that, but they had a 12-hour shift staffing schedule, and that seems hard on personnel. And then if you're working a night shift, what are you really doing at night? So you might as well work a 24-hour shift, get your training in during the day, and then get your rest and run your calls at night.
Okay. And then in terms of who would have authority over this new district, you said a board would be selected, or is that?
It would be an elected board, so
Elected board, okay.
the first step would be if there wasn't time to elect a board, it would probably be an appointed board, and the county chiefs would more than likely fill that role. So you'd have fire chiefs from, let's say, Templeton, Paso Robles, 5 cities, wherever. I attend regular county chiefs meetings, and there's 7 cities and 3 districts that attend, so that would be probably the first board, and then it would go out to an election, and then people would be elected. And I would encourage people from different areas to get on that board. Like I said, people from each section should be represented.
All right.
And that includes the San Miguel Community Service District boundaries. The district boundaries would not be abandoned, it would just be, our service would be enhanced throughout the district.
And then, so like I think for this month, the report, we had like 19 calls. Is that-
Our call volume has been down, and that's a good thing. I believe that has a lot to do with the work that we've done in let's say the last 12 months, working with the Sheriff's Department, working with code enforcement, county code enforcement, working with the Community Housing Development Group to handle these problematic properties. But low call volume is a good thing, but it's not going to be a consistent thing. It's just that time of year. We'll pick back up.
And then what percentage of our calls are kind of beyond our current C.S.D.
We're running
into that new
with
area?
the last stats that I had in there, it was close to 20%. And with that, with the larger footprint, that call volume would go up as well, because we'd be first out on those calls versus being second out.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Davis.
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned that with this extra money, you're going to build more housing for your staff. Well, what are you going to do with that thing that's going down there now?
Well, as part of these strategic plans, if you look at the strategic plan, it's outlined. So the temporary housing unit is the first step in the process, and then once the temporary housing unit is in place, we'd utilize that when the time comes to build However, we're going to provide permanent housing for our fire department staff. And there's a few different options on the table. Our plan at the time was to build an apparatus bay to the north and then rehab the existing fire station to have housing and a community room and a training area and things of that nature. But as the process has developed, I have a different vision, and the vision is to just build a newer building on the north that would have the housing component, and it would have the community space and the office space, leave the apparatus bay intact, and then we would dedicate the front office of that office space for the sheriff's department. And the housing needs to be sold. It's always on the plan to be sold. So once it has exceeded its usefulness, it'll be surplus, and then we'll recoup the money for that sale. It's not a permanent fixture.
Well, I know. Well, what you just said is a good idea. I don't never understand why you guys didn't build something on the north end of the property that we own instead of...
That is still the plan, to build something north of the property.
Yeah.
It's just what that is going to look like. And to fill the gap, we can't sleep people in the station as it currently is configured because it's illegal. We cannot do that. It would be like having somebody sleep in a garage.
I understand that fully, but to me, all the money that's went in that double wide, you could have already made a nice building on the property that the C.S.D. owns.
Well, the cost of fire stations is very high, and I've discussed this with the county chiefs, and they've sent representatives to Arizona for a build conference for fire stations. And for essential services, fire department housing, or fire stations, the low end is $800 a square foot, the high end is $1,200 a square foot. Password was just spent $1,000 a square foot to build their facility. So obviously we don't need to, have a facility as large as theirs, but they do have the economy of scale. So I don't think a couple $100,000 would have got us very far. We might have been able to get some plans, but it wouldn't have served the need. And the need is to have the bodies in the district all the time to service the community. So without that, we would make no progress. And this has always been, or not always been, but it has been identified within the strategic plan. And the temporary housing unit is the first step outlined in the strategic plan. The LAFCO process is the second or third step in the strategic plan, and the build-outs are in there as well. So those are outlined, the strategic plans for fires, pages 13 through 16, and also 21, and the municipal service review from LAFCO, pages 28 through 43.
That's all, but like I said, the amount of money you spent on that, you could have built a really nice thing on our property.
In $2,000, the year 2000, our fire station cost $200,000 plus or minus to build. There's no way you could approach that now. The process alone to get the permit, you saw it outlined in the financials, and I'm not going to quote something I don't have in front of me, but it was exorbitant. And design teams are super expensive to get design teams on board to design essential service facilities. You're talking architects, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, electrical engineers, soils engineers. You can't just willy-nilly go to anybody and have it done. They have a high level of design requirements.
Okay.
With that, I just want to say that the discussion regarding the temporary housing is outside of the scope of the current agenda item. It was already on, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Said it was outside the current discussion, the housing unit.
Right, it's outlined in the plan, but it's not correct. Thank you.
I do have one more comment.
Sure.
Quick question. So, with this additional area, are you now going to be the point of contact for permits for their fire inspections for buildings?
Yes, so that we would absorb that as well. So
That would be
building
good.
permits, so we'd be able to collect public facilities fees
Yeah,
for projects within that
That's
footprint. So that's a snapshot of revenue that we didn't incorporate into this because it's unknown. You know, there could be, you know, people could just stop building, but we can't project that number. It's just, it's an unknown.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
that's all.
At this time, we have public comment. Please approach your lectern and sign in.
Yes, thank you. I agree very well. And I spent 30 years of my life living in fire stations. So I know a lot about them, a lot. I'm living over the rigs and sliding down the poles and jumping on. I'm working 24/7 on all kinds of stuff. Who owns the fire apparatus and the fire station and pays the bills? Is it the C.S.D. that funds all this stuff? And if they fund all of this stuff, how is making, and I don't care one way or the other, you make your area bigger and your equipment and your manpower doesn't grow like that. You're servicing a larger area, you're not gonna have better service for the people that live in the smaller part that you just expanded.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure you gotta have 4 guys on a rig, because you gotta have 2 outside if you got 2 going inside. So if you go to a fire, you gotta have 2 guys to back up the 2 guys that are fighting the fire. And the engineer can't be one of them, so he can't leave the rig, who's gonna be pumping the water? You just don't leave it pumping on its own. Somebody's gotta be there to man that particular stuff. My biggest thing that I can see outside in the outlying areas, and I live in an outlying area, in Creston, is, I moved out there, I built accordingly and did certain things because of my experiences and stuff, because I knew it was gonna be longer for somebody to get to me, but I really didn't need them help. In fact, I own my own fire engine, it sits on my ranch. But you have all the insurance companies are leaving our state. And the fair plan insurance is not a fair plan. You're gonna pay thousands of dollars if you don't own your stuff and you wanna go that, and you have to go that route. So, I'm pretty sure I heard that this wasn't gonna cost the people anymore, but then all of a sudden it was gonna cost them, now for inspections and other things. So, I don't really, I don't know, maybe there's a benefit for the fire department, and maybe there is a benefit down the road for the individuals who live here, but I'm not really sure. So is this a 218 vote that the city votes on, that they're, and then how do you get reimbursed for your equipment and your fire station and stuff that the C.S.D. and the participants have already paid for? If they're gonna be a separate entity, are you gonna have another board? Is there gonna be a separate attorney for them? Is there gonna be a separate manager for them? Is it still gonna come here? I'm just curious. I don't really know. And if you go to mutual aid and you leave here, there's nobody here. So making your fire department bigger so you can go do other things doesn't make the service better for the people that live in the community.